Tateti savanam gatva.
Tateti savanam gatva.
Mrigan hatva kriyarhanam.
Mrigan hatva kriyaharanam.
Shanto bhukshito vira.
Shanto bhukshito vira.
Sasham chadat apasmriti.
Shasham chada apasmriti. Tateti savanam gatva.
Tateti savanam gatva.
Mrigan hatva kriyahanam.
Mrigan hatva kriyahanam.
Shanto bubukshito vira.
Shanto bhukshito vira.
Shasham chadat apasmriti.
Shasham chadat apasmriti.
Tateti savanam gatva.
Tateti savanam gatva. Mrigan hatva kriyahanam.
Shanto bhukshito vira. Shasham chadat apasmriti.
The word by word goes like this: tata,
Tata,
according to the direction.
according to the direction.
Iti, thus.
Thus.
Saha,
Saha,
vikupshi,
vikupshi,
vanam, to the forest.
to the forest.
Gatva,
Gatva,
going.
going.
Mrigan,
Mrigan,
animals.
animals.
Atva,
Atva,
killing.
Killing.
Kriya arhana,
Kriyaharanam.
suitable for offering to the yajna.
Suitable for offering to the
Yajna.
Shroud ceremony.
in the shroud ceremony.
Shrantaha,
Shrantaha,
when he was fatigued.
When he was fatigued.
Bhukshitaha,
Bhukshitaha,
and hungry.
and hungry.
Viraha,
Viraha,
the hero.
the hero.
Shasham,
Shasham,
a rabbit.
a rabbit.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
Also.
Adat,
Adat,
he ate.
he ate.
Apasmritihi,
Apasmritihi,
forgetting
forgetting
that the flesh was meant for offering
that the
Flesh was meant for offering
in the shroud.
in the shroud.
Translation.
translation.
Thank you very, very much. Very, very much. Okay. Thereafter, Ikshvaku's son, Vikupshi, went to the forest and killed many animals suitable for being offered as oblations. But when fatigued and hungry, he became forgetful and ate a rabbit he had killed. Okay, good enough. Now we'll go to the purport and we'll charade it out. All right. It is evident that Kshatriyas killed animals in the...
Forest.
Thank you. Swaying Jingu to the side. Animals of, it is evident that Kshatriyas killed animals in the forest because the flesh of the animals are suitable to be offered at a particular type of
Sacrifice.
yajna. Offering oblations to the forefathers in the ceremony known as Shraddha is also a kind of
Yajna.
in this
Yajna.
flesh obtained from the forest by hunting could be offered. However, in the present age, Kali Yuga, this kind of offering is forbidden. Quoting from the Brahma-Vaidika Purana, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Ashvamedan Gavalabham Sanyasam Palapaitrikam Hevarena Sutotpatim Kalau Pancha Vivarjayat. In this age of Kali, five acts are
Forbidden.
forbidden. The offering of a
Horse.
in
Yajna.
sacrifice, the offering of a
Cow.
in sacrifice, the acceptance of the order of sannyas, the offering of relations of flesh to the forefathers, and a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. The word pala vaidrakan refers to an offering of flesh and oblations to forefathers. Formerly, such an offering was allowed, but in this age it is
Forbidden.
forbidden. In this age, Kali Yuga, everyone is expert in hunting animals. Vishaka, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, obeisances all words to Srila Prabhupada. How are you?
All
glory
glory
is
to
to
God.
Maharaj, is this a good time?
Is that?
No.
Oh, okay, I got it. Okay.
We're having a class for those who
Sorry
have
to
class.
disturb you.
No problem. We'll call you after.
Okay, Maharaj.
In this age, Kali Yuga, everyone is expert at hunting animals.
But
But most of the people are
Farmers.
Shudras, not
Kshatriyas.
Kshatriyas. According to Vedic conjunctions, however,
How? Only?
only Kshatriyas are allowed to
Kill.
hunt, whereas Shudras are allowed to eat
Meat.
flesh after offering
Good.
goats or other insignificant animals before the deity of goddess.
Holly.
Durga.
Or similar demigods. On the whole, meat eating is not completely forbidden. A particular class of men is allowed to eat meat according to various circumstances and injunctions. As far as eating beef is concerned, however, it is strictly forbidden to everyone.
One.
Thus, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna personally speaks of Goruksham, cow protection. Meat eaters, according to their different positions and the directions of the Shastra, are allowed to eat
Meat.
Flesh.
okay? But never the flesh of cows. Cows must be given all
Protection.
protection. Very good. Okay, so animals were allowed to be eaten under certain circumstances. Followers of Kali, they do that. And there's a famous Kali Ghat, right, in Kolkata, and they offer goats and sacrifice. Like, how many of you would like to go there? Okay, that's very good. So don't go there then. Okay, don't go there. So certain circumstances, Prabhupada also mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, the part where he talks about Kshatriyas were allowed to actually, go for an animal. In some traditions, young men to prove their manhood would go out and go after a tiger or lion and just try to defeat them. In such circumstances, when going for training in the forest or jungle, you wouldn't have too many choices. You could eat some green things that are out there, but you'd also be in a position where you might have to hunt an animal. I'll also allow you to engage in practice, which was necessary. These Kshatriyas learned how to survive. And so that kind of thing went on. We're talking here about a rabbit. Are some of you familiar with the novel by John Steinbeck? It's called Of Mice and Men. There's an instance of two men during the Depression time were looking for work, and they found a place where they could work with other people who were without a job. And I just can't remember the two main characters, but it was something it was compulsory for us to read in high school at one time, Of Mice and Men. And John Steinbeck, he really is a fantastic writer. He did a number of things. He oftentimes do stories about the Depression. What comes to mind is The Grapes of Wrath is one, and a host of others. So there was one person, they were kind of like brothers or very close friends. One was buried together, the other one had some mental instability. And he says, when we get a lot of money, we'll get our land and we'll have our own farm and we'll have rabbits. We'll have rabbits, won't we? We kept bringing that up, that dream, to have your own land and be able to, live off of it was a big dream for people in those days. Do you remember the characters? Lyson. Yeah, so it's there. It's a real interesting story, how it plays out. And the one fellow who was not altogether, he accidentally, killed a woman, and it was just had these strong bare hands, and he didn't know what he was doing, and he accidentally, snapped her in the bar. She was a seductive lady, so somebody could say, oh, she deserved it. But, so the posse went out after him, after the guy had to leave, and his friend came along, and before they could get at him, he shot his friend, which would be probably less brutal. So it's a very interesting story about, like, mercy killing, they call it. So Kshatriyas were allowed to do this now. There's a quote here from the Shastras, from Brahma-Vaivarta Purana, where it's clearly mentioned that there are 5 things that are not permissible in the Kali Yuga. And this quotation came from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he's speaking to the Muslim leader Chand Kazi, who happened to be in the area of the district of Nadia, in Bengal. And so the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu challenged. He challenged Chand Kazi, you Muslims, you eat your cow, and you eat the cow, which is like your mother, you eat the bull, which is like your father. That's your faith. Now Chand Kazi kind of snapped back. You have something in the religion from the old Puranic times where you're allowed to have to push a horse into the fire or stab him, and also a cow. These are things that are unthinkable. But we are talking about times when Brahmins or priests were very qualified. They would chant everything according to meter. Pronunciation had to be excellent. Otherwise, the yajna won't work out. So it was a way to, Mahaprabhu was speaking to Chand Kazi, saying it was a way to test that you were indeed very, let's say, adept at chanting mantras and doing yajnas. So the animal would come out, rejuvenated, an old one was pushed into the fire, a new one would come out. That means that everything was expertly done, very meticulously done. And so that's what was important in days gone by. And one of the things also that you find interesting in this Kali Yuga, you don't take the order of sannyas. So that is the general rule, that people are not really qualified for that. They're taking up that portfolio. But in certain circumstances it was allowed, and we know Srila Prabhupada encouraged it. Prabhupada was in a kind of a, let's say, emergency mode. The world is crumbling, it's falling apart morally, and we have to have some preachers out there. We have to have some men who are liberated, free, that can actually travel around and preach the gospel of the Bhagavad Gita. And so the Chand Kazi sort of backed down. He said, yeah, it's true, your scriptures go way back, but our scriptures are relatively new. 1,500 years ago, they were sort of formulated. And so if you want to compare the two, the oldest tradition is the Vedic one. It's a Dharmic one. It's, and it's still intact. The people who follow this have some resilience, even though many attempts were made, even during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, to convert people. So what they would do, they would tax only Hindus and not the Muslims. So then everyone would get poor. Okay, well, I'll just be a Muslim then, and so that I can live easy. So that was one thing. It was also another thing, they had little pots, and some of the more simple Hindus, they believe that if water is poured from a pot owned by a Muslim, you believe that, and it falls on you, you believe, now I'm converted. Now I'm one of them. I'm no longer a follower of the Vedic tradition. Funny, isn't it? Some people will believe it could be that simple. Anyways, that's the reference point that's being. made here during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. Sacrifice, of course, is essential, and it's there in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Sahaya, how does it go? Yatnarita karamano yatra. You can look it up, 3, 9, 3, 9. Yatnarita karamano yatra, loko yam karma bandhana. And Krishna's telling Arjuna about how yajna is important, and that you do all yajnas for the pleasure of Vishnu. That will free you from entanglement, free you from karma. And that's what everybody wants, karma bandhana, bondage, to be bound. It must come from the Sanskrit, bandhana. I'm sure it comes from there. And you can get free from all of this by doing yajnas for the pleasure of Vishnu. And that is really what yajnas are meant for. Samsiddhir haritoshanam. That means that yajna is meant for the tosham, to please Vishnu. And the next verse, 3:10, you can look at that one too, because I know you've all been looking at 3:9 very faithfully. Now you can look at 3:10. Sahayagya Prakash Vishva. And Krishna saying in there, at the time of creation, when there were forefathers, ancestors, humans were created. And for them, yajna was also formulated. Yajna, sacrifice. Humans and sacrifices, they go hand in hand. Human life is meant for that, sacrifice. And in a sort of capitalistic world, they never talk like that, right? We want your money, buy our product. It's all very mercantile kind of oriented. Another thing that I want to sort of pull out of this shloka is that in some of the early versions of the Bhagavad Gita, published by ISKCON, there's a chapter 18, you might look that one up too, text 44. Krishna's telling Arjuna about the 4 social orders and 4 spiritual orders. Particularly there he's talking about what do Brahmins do, or how do we know a Brahmin. Shamadhamashchavak shaucham shantir arjavam evacha jnanam vijnanam astike paramakarma subhavajam. So a Brahmin is known by certain qualities. Peacefulness, being, let's say, having control of the mind, and so on like that. So the Brahman is described. Then the Kshatriya is described in the next verse, verse 43. Tejo, Teja means resourceful, or rather being powerful, influential. Soryam, to be heroic is the main first. Tejas, you're very influential. Daksham, Daksham, peaceful. And Dhritir, you're very determined, right? Kshatriyas have to be extremely focused, good aim. Yuyutsula, or Jiu-Jitsu. That word comes from Yuda. Yuda means fight in battle. So you have to be a good fighter. You have to be in practice. You have to be just totally trained, okay? Yude and other qualities of being courageous, right? That's what we're really being told. Danam, like danam, or dane, or donate. It comes from the Sanskrit. Being generous. Isn't this something?
Yeah.
Ishvara, leadership, having leadership qualities, and this how Kshatriyas are known. Now we're going to go to verse 44, right? And we're going to understand what is the role of the other classes, the Vaishyas and the Shudras. Okay? So here we go. Farming, cow protection, Goraksha, that's the word that's used here. Go means cow, Raksha, protect. Now, in the early versions of Bhagavad Gita, the translation went like this: cattle raising. When Prabhupada saw that, I don't think this is correct. He wanted it corrected. Cattle raising means raise cattle for eating, for beef. Like cattle raising, cattle, you where that cattle is, refers to, wild, what would you call it, stock animals for eating them. And that's not what Vaishyas are all about. They manage, agriculturalism, and that is what Nanda Maharaj was. He was a manager of the, of agriculture. He wasn't the worker, he would manage. And the Shudras are the people who do the service. So I wanted, because it's in the purport, just wanted to pull this out for you to, give some thought to that. Another thing that's mentioned is Shraddha. Shraddha, we say sometimes. Shraddha is a kind of a yajna, Prabhupada explains here. And it's also mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Shraddha. Advaita Charya was involved in Shraddha. And, that is, you offer like what's called pinda to the forefathers, We have some people in our community here, they always come in the fall time, and they always unload, they buy for me personally, it's supposed to give to the Brahmins, feed them as well. But they always give me a sweatshirt or a hoodie or sweatpants every year. So I have accumulated a few, I could open up a store. But it was very nice of them to have that kind of thought in mind. And so it was during Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time that some of these devotees that later became part of the Panchatattva engaged in Shraddha. Is it the right thing to do? Is it this practice? To some degree it is. There's no harm in helping people who are suspended, in what the Christians call purgatory. They're held in and they call Pitri Loka. Here's another flaw in the translation. People couldn't understand, Prabhupada's accent always. So they thought that the Pitri means the planet of trees. Pitri, planet of trees. So they wrote in Pitri's translation is planet of trees. And that's why the BBT, they detected some of these flaws, and they had to go back and go through the whole thing and just tidy it up. And now some devotees, you might hear about this, and say, those books, from 1973 or whenever it was, we all learned from them, they were pure, they were coming from Prabhupada, but they forget that flaws were made. Even Hayagriva, who was there in the beginning, he was an English professor, and he got out Prabhupada in the mission by by getting transcripts and then getting it on a paper in English. Well, Hayagriva, if he didn't like something, he might take out a sentence or a whole paragraph. It's not the right thing to do, right? As an editor, you may be changing some words, you might be, doing something with punctuation, fix the grammar, but you have no license to pull out some paragraphs. So that's why the BBT puts so much work into it. We used to have Dravidical here every year for Rath Yatra, and when COVID happened, then we stopped coming. That damn COVID. So he and Jayadvaita Maharaj, they're both they're brahmacharis, Naishtiki brahmacharis, Jewish background, smart kids, and I would trust their translation any day. But this is why when people say, oh, they changed the books, but they didn't change the philosophy. They actually tidied it up, and that's what an editor is supposed to do. Most authors don't just pass their book through. They have an editor, somebody who looks after and just tweaks the compositions. anyways, on these different categories, we discuss different things. I think the important element is that in the Kali Yuga, you just can't do what people used to do. And Ikshvaku, he appears in the line of the Ramachandra, who appeared in Treta Yuga. So you're talking about a very long time ago, when things were different, circumstances were different. Now, we sometimes talk about the Bible, biblical studies. There's an Old Testament and New Testament. We've heard about it, right? In the Old Testament, they're like elements of the Torah, which is like the Jewish tradition. There's a lot of details there, and some of them are kind of irrelevant. One interesting thing about the studies that you find, biblical studies, they also have a genealogical table. There's this guy and this gal, and they got together and they had these children. And this child, got together with this queen, and they got together, they had children. It just goes on. The whole role of, the family tree, what do you call it? By the way, in my family tree, we have a family tree, we have a book. We've kept the records from 500 years.
Ooh.
The time of Chitin Maharaj. And I've seen the latest version. It's got pictures of some of the people, And they also have a picture of me with my feet. Just feet, that I'm in there. But somebody might ask, well, what's the point of going to all these names and all these people? It's so intricate and so complex. What would be the reason for us to study these things? Why? Can anybody think about a reason for going through genealogical tables? Gene meaning the genes, to study the genes, the DNAs of the past. What would be a good reason for doing that? Yeah.
We would be able to know if you're coming from a great lineage, like a king or a rishi,
Yeah, that's right.
some royal order.
Yeah, they would take note of that lineage, that clan. That's go.
You also need to see the context. Usually a lot of these conversations in Bhagavatam are between kings. So they're between kings, so obviously kings would relate.
They were important, yeah.
Like Parikshit Maharaj, for example.
Yeah, it's good to, see, look at these lineages, which are people of noble character. Brahmins and Kshatriyas. In fact, most of the stories in the Bhagavatam and the Vedas in general, it's about kings and Brahmins. Right? You don't hear too much about Shudra stories, or the unhoused, or the homeless people, like that. Of course, that Kalo Shudra Sambhava, in this day and age, people are lower than Shudra by nature, by their behavior. Yeah, but it is important to look at some of these noble characters. And also gives a little endorsement towards family. Keep an eye on family. Now, in Kali Yuga, the families have been so disjointed. I also feel very bad. I'm on the phone sometimes and I hear people say, oh yeah, so and so, who was married to so-and-so. What do you mean, so was? Oh, his ex. Oh, okay, right. So it goes on, even among some of the devotees are afraid. Batting average is not that good when it comes to marriage, and children. So I think in the ISKCON movement, we have to put a little more, emphasis on having families, being able to trace them back, and trying to match up things in a compatible way. And I think it's really important. And people will join our movement like anything when they see we have solid families. So it's important. Yeah, so those are some of the discussions, and we are at a point where we must leave some time for your questions or reflections, deliberations. All right. Okay. But, in general, we're just pulling out some themes that are here and trying to make some sense of it. Okay? Any questions or comments? I think one of the most, what we were able to spend a little time on the derivatives, word derivatives, right? Can I do one more?
Yes.
Going, vulgati. They say that the word walking comes from Wolken, which is Old German. A lot of Old German words have their origin from Sanskrit. You know, so vulgati means going, you know, going to some destination. And in those days, the mode of transport was always walking. You know? Isn't it interesting? Vulgati. Okay, question, you, sir.
Thank you, Maharaj, for the wonderful class. So my question is regarding this, like you mentioned about the lineage thing. So it was mentioned in 8th canto also, and in 9th canto also. There are so many names are mentioned in
Yes.
some chapters. So why is it necessary to read about these kings and the lineages in Bhagavatam?
Is it necessary to go through them? It doesn't hurt to, you know, try to pronounce them. And it's when you give notice or you acknowledge, you know, people of character, people of nobility, people who are saintly, there's a purification behind it. You know? It's not as powerful as mantras, you know, as reciting mantras, but there's some power in mentioning the names of, you know, honorable people. And, you know, because it wears out your consciousness. So there's no harm in just reading the little lines. You don't have to go, what kind of purport can you know, construe out of reading a list of people's names, which are sometimes very hard to pronounce. I bet, like some of them, oh my God, do I have to? My tongue doesn't want to do it. Like when you first read the chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, there's names in there like, wow, my God, very strong names in there. And you wonder, what, is it relevant? Who cares? But when you want to dig a little bit, you know, like when a dog digs, you hear something, you know, a fox, so you see the fox, go like this in the snow, they hear something, put their ear to us. So if you want to do like that, you want to dig a little bit and capture some of these names, like even King Bharat, you know, he had some connections with, what's his name? She's Bharat, what's the leader of the Jain tradition. Anybody remember? Rishabh. Oh, they're related. I remember we did a play in Mayapur and we had Urmila. I asked her if she'd like to be in a play. So she played sort of a dysfunctional mom to Jadabharat. And we had her just, you know, we gave her something to do. She was always eating cashews. And she was quite, you know, like unreasonable. That's how the script goes. We had such a good time with her and everybody in there. And it was one of my favorite stories of Jadabharat. But she realized, oh, there's a connection. Even she got, you know, even though she's quite scholarly, there's a connection between these two people. So it's nice to tie it in together, isn't it? It's nice to do that. The coincidence gets you a little excited. I'm sure there's other good reasons for us to, you know, go over these family trees. But there is some, in the culture, there tends to be a succession always. Like in, it's kind of like the way that it was. A young man follows what his father did, and you can follow it, trace back. it's not a bad idea to do that, you know, to be able to know. I was recently in Guyana, Trinidad, and there are devotees, and also in Mauritius, you know, these are all people, Southeast Asian background. And I asked some of the devotees, do you know your ancestors? Well, some of them have been able to do that by some research, you know. Some have been able to go to the towns where their great grandparents were living in Bihar or something like that, you know. So it's just a person's interest, you know, who am I related to? Who's my connection? I want to know. Karna was born of Kunti and Surya, the sun god, but he didn't know. So he was living in like a doubt, in a kind of a fog. But he really wanted to know the connections. So he found out in a very unique way. This monk came just before the battle, Kurukshetra. He said, I am your mother, and you can just imagine how shocked he was, how unprepared he was for that. So I think it gives a little bit of authenticity also, you know, to like these are not made up stories. These are not characters that are fictitious, they're real people. And we know that because we can trace back, this person was born of that individual, this king, that queen, you know. Just gives that a little authentic flavor, doesn't it?
Yes.
Good. Anybody else? I've got some other questions. See.
Yes. Maharaj, we see that Arjuna and Pandavas, they being Kshatriyas, they lived in forest also, but we don't see any description of them eating meat.
No.
And on the other side, we see descriptions of other kings who ate meat. So, is there there are different classes of Kshatriyas also, that you know, some of them they are elevated, so they don't eat meat. Some of them they are still low class.
I think it's probably a good case there. We see that amongst Brahmins also. I mean, there's some Brahmins. One of our good friends, he had a course called Cults at McMaster University. You get like 600 people in the room and we present ourselves. And he wanted his students to understand we're not a cult. It was Dave Kingsley, such a nice guy, such a beautiful guy. And, you know, we forgot why I brought his name up. What was our discussion? I didn't sleep last night, that's why.
Different classes of Kshatriyas.
Yeah, so he was saying he traveled with his wife to India, you know, being that this is his interest, you know, theology. And he went to some places where the Brahmins they have the cliques, you know. A group of Brahmins, the ones that are the pundits. And you have a group of Brahmins who do mostly the puja, you know. And so they've got their all little groups like that, different levels or departments. So it would be kind of natural that you probably have, you know, Kshatriyas who probably most likely fit the bill. I have one godbrother. His name is Bhumna. He lives in Hamilton. He is an amazing brain. He knows the history like in and out. Some are there. You've met him before? He can outdo anybody who thinks that they know something about Vedic culture. He's got it all down, all in his head. He's a fast talker, and he's a brilliant guy. His surname is Kennedy. You know? We got to know his mom. She was also interested, but wow. He can probably answer all your questions on this matter. You know, I wish we could get him here he's brilliant, and he drives a truck. He never went to school, but I was just gifted. Well, like a prodigy somehow. How do you know this? Where did it come from? You know, I mean, it just knocks you off your socks. Except for compression socks, like these socks just stick to your body. Okay, so I mean, I hope that answers your question, addresses the issue. Anybody else? So what's the takeaway? Right? What's the takeaway in this discussion here? What's the takeaway? 4 words. 4 words that summarizes the takeaway. Okay, who will be the first? Si, senor.
The age of coming.
The age of Kali, okay, all right. Yeah, it's a component, yes.
Some things are forbidden.
Some things are forbidden, yeah, that's very good, that's right. Not suitable for this age, that's right, very, very smart. Anything else?
Importance of knowing lineage. Importance of knowing the
Importance
lineage.
of lineage. Learn the lineages.
Learn the lineage.
Do learn the lineages. Okay. Anything else? Check it out now, do you have any?
Oh, I came late, so.
We don't mind if you came late. Three
Not
minutes.
kill animals in forest.
What about animals?
Not kill animals.
Don't kill animals in the forest, don't, okay, fair. Yeah, no. Because we're not qualified.
Protect the cows.
Protect the cows, that's a good one. Protect the
Holy cow.
holy
Oh, the
cows.
cows.
Good. I like it. We're looking for 4 words, remember? What else? Anything else? Whatever came was just beautiful. Over the whole thing, please, if you can think of something, that would be great. Because through the day, you want to reflect on what was the verse about. What about go for proper editing? Okay, that's good enough. Thank you very much. So, a couple of us, myself and the gentleman, we're going to Montreal. We'll be back on Sunday night. Yeah. He's going to do a wedding there. We're going to initiate some of the weddings there. So. Pray that it won't rain a whole week. We'll have some sun. Okay, thank you very much. Run check out the restaurant.